Okay, it's recording. Do you see
Excellent.
that too? Yeah, okay.
Thanks.
All right, so I have been writing about this recently. I haven't published it yet. I'm working on a book on gender identity development. And one of the things that I've just been working on a chapter on non-binary development, which I'm using as a large category to include all those words you used before: homosexuality, bisexuality, transsexuality, transgender. And one of the things I've been doing is to, as you say, to treat these terms somewhat historically. And if you do that, you see that the notion of transsexuality, at least in English, and this is I've been using something called Google Ngrams, and it surveys English language books. So it may be that certain things are lost in translation, but let's stipulate that what I'm saying comes out of the use of these words in the English language. And I guess each language speaking group has their own struggles about how to use these words. But transsexuality is a word that was really used a lot in the 50s and 60s and isn't considered a current term. The current term is, I'm sorry, yes, transsexuality. The current term, the term of art, if you will, is transgender. But transgender is a multiple term. So there are, I mean, and when it first came into being, it was seen in this very kind of strict binary way of, as you say, a male and a female body, or a female and a male body. And there are certainly people who apply that concept to themselves. But has emerged in the last 1 to 2 decades a whole group of people that may be put in the category of queer, in that they identify themselves as maybe as transsexual or as non-binary, and then there's a whole set of words in between that are used to describe people who and I think non-binary is good as a big word to categorize people who do not feel comfortable either with a traditional male or masculine identity or a traditional female or feminine identity. And within that group, people accommodate those feelings in a whole variety of ways. Some do seek medical intervention, and the levels of medical intervention differ from one person to the next. So for some people, it may involve surgery or hormones. For some people, it may involve only breast surgery, but not genital surgery. For some people, it may not involve hormones. It may just involve clothing or gender presentation. And also for those people, there are a variety of different sexual orientations. But the notion of sexual orientation becomes strange if you are not dealing with a dualism, if you're not dealing with the binary, because the notion of homosexuality and heterosexuality is built in as a binary notion. So the minute you have people who are themselves non-binary, then who they are attracted to, it can't work as an either or. Either I'm attracted to men or I'm attracted to women. And there's a whole new scholarship that's arisen to try to allow people to place themselves in a multi-level spectrum of attractions that it may include masculinity or femininity, but may also include being attracted to people who like multiple partners, being not being attracted to people. I mean, agender is now a term that's in the world. So so what you have that's evolved is a very much more complex system, and it's hard to pin down, partly because it's continuing to change. It's changing very rapidly. And you can see this if you do these engrams. I don't know if Google in Spanish has an
Yeah, we also use it. Yeah, there is also Google Ngram for Spanish language.
Well, you should try.
Well, the results will be quite different, but we can
I'm
use
sure
it.
they would, and that would actually be fascinating to do. But I think you would learn a lot about these questions if you poked these words into it, in these different words and whatever the Spanish equivalents are, to see when they first started being used, when they appeared, how many of them appear and disappear. And I had a friend who's quite computer savvy teaching me how to go behind the mgram and pull out the raw data so that you can graph several of them together in using Excel or something like that. So you can make these nice graphs where you can show the decline of transsexual and the rise of transgender on a single graph. They're quite instructive in terms of understanding the dynamism of these words and these concepts, and therefore people who are applying them to themselves.
I guess that we have some troubles to make that to look for that words, because we had a dictatorship, so maybe there was a censorship and we cannot track some terms so easily. But I'm not sure. I didn't.
Yeah, I think a lot of these. So I'm trying to think, what year did, I mean, when did the dictatorship end? When did things open up? What was it, the 1980s?
1975.
Yeah, okay, so figure there's a lag time for words to start to appear. You could certainly do the more recent period.
Okay.
And maybe you could do the period before, up through the 1930s, which is that's an older history, but it's an interesting one. And it would be interesting to see what what happened during the Franco era with these words and whether they just disappeared. I mean, that is a different story. It's quite interesting. Or you can go on to an English language Google and do these for the English language books too. And the comparison might be quite fascinating, actually.
Yeah. I completely agree. In fact, I think that the American scholars are doing the digital humanities, and it's a great tool to obtain new knowledge about the past.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Yes. I also wanted to, well, the question is, in short, how can we escape from that binarism? Because I'm also thinking in a book. I don't know if you have read it, The Rainbow of Evolution.
Yes.
And it was quite interesting to me because, well, I have to admit that I was thinking about sex like something natural, and gender like something cultural. And I know I'm completely wrong, but that book showed me that even in nature, you can talk about sex and also about gender. The author was talking about gender within the nature, and that's what was completely new and shocking to me. So I don't know if that's the way in order to escape from binarism, or if you see a different pathway. Or
yeah, I do. I mean this is what I'm writing about right now. So but it's filled with traps where you think you're escaping the binary, and you're just rewording it, and it's actually still there. And that's what happened with the with American feminism and the sex-gender divide, where sex and gender became a way of combating a political argument about biological essentialism, that women couldn't be equal in the public sphere because they were biologically inferior. So that sex gender binary was a way of sort of taking sex and the biology and putting it aside and saying it's about gender, and yes, it's the system of gender that keeps women unequal in the public sphere, but you were still reasserting a notion that there was this thing, sex, that could control this other thing, the body, and it was still a binary setup. And some feminists in the 90s really began to critique it. I hinted at it, at a critique of it in Sexing the Body in the 2000 edition. But what I've really developed since then is that we have to think much less statically about development. And so what I'm trying to do is develop a dynamic systems approach to understanding the development of, and I'm merging two words. I'm calling them gender/sex, or if I'm saying it in English, gender sex, is sort of one word. And a colleague of mine has pointed out, and this is true, that we actually have to say gender sexuality, because sexuality is also linked into concepts of gender and sex. But one of the things I'm trying to do is figure out how these ways of thinking about oneself and how these self-identities emerge at very young ages and become embodied, become part of our sensory system, really. So which is why they're both gender and they're sex at the same time, if you consider sex as biology and gender as culture, where culture changes the body so that you can't, in a dynamic way, and it happens developmentally, and if certain things happen at one age, then the bodies change and becomes the platform for the next building stage. You can think of it kind of as a spiral. Development is kind of a spiral in which you're building on what's happened already. And if you do that, you start to think of gender sex as a process, and it's a continuous process. It's a dynamic process. It's not a thing that you are, but it is how you are in a context at any one period in your life cycle. And I think that may be a way of breaking out of this sort of fixed causation of it's one thing or another, or it's part, 50% this and 50% that, but to break out of a static kind of digital way of looking at things and look at human development, both physiologically and behaviorally, as a continual set of processes. I don't know if that helps or not, but that's where I'm headed. Hopefully, by the time the book is done, it will be clearer.
In Spain, it's very popular. Beatriz Preciado. She's now Paul Preciado. I don't know if you have read some of.
Tell me the name again.
Paul Preciado. Paul Preciado.
I don't think I know.
Well, he's writing about all these topics, and I think he's translated into English. But at the beginning, she was Beatriz Preciado, and now is Paul Preciado, and he's talking about how he transformed himself, and he was trying to understand his own identity, because at the beginning she was feeling like a lesbian, and then he was feeling like a man, and the latest book is not translated into English yet, but it's called Dysphoria Mundi. And I think it's quite interesting. Anyway,
Sounds interesting. Would you email me the name and a couple of
yeah,
references?
of course, absolutely,
Thank you.
absolutely.
Thank you.
I would like to ask you about Material Girls by Kathleen Stock, because that book has been translated into Spanish very recently, and actually, I have some. I don't know.
I have to say I haven't read it.
No,
No,
because there is a whole chapter about you.
there is.
Yeah. And there is also a whole chapter about Judith Butler. So I was intrigued, or I was interested in knowing what's your response, your answer, because she is dedicating a whole chapter about your, I mean, misunderstanding. She thinks you are grown because you argue that sex is like a continuum, and well, you are telling me that you didn't read the book, but I think it's interesting to discuss about that book, because she thinks she has a very strong opinion about all the theories and opinions, your perspective, Judith Butler's perspective. So you didn't Material Girls because you are not interested, or you didn't have time,
I
or
think I was only vaguely aware of it. I'm aware of her name and that she's been very controversial. But no, I tend not to get into arguments with people who are strongly attacking me, because I feel like it's an energy drain,
yeah,
and it's
understand.
all negative. This isn't about arguing that this person is right and this person is wrong. In my mind, for me, what I want to spend my energy doing is presenting a different point of view that people can use instead of that argument. Because that argument, if I've probably seen parts of it, if it's the argument that says no, sex is really binary and it's real, and you're stupid, which is sort of what these arguments go, and they're eggs and sperm, so shut up. I mean, that's what it comes down to on Twitter when I hear these. I'm really not interested, because these are people who don't actually want to engage in exchanges, or they aren't people who think that maybe those of us who've been thinking about this for a long time might have a really different viewpoint for a reason. And there's not really an interest in engaging and trying to figure out where differences lie and why. It really is beating each other over the head until one person says, in English we say, cry uncle, till one person gives up and says, okay, you're right, let's stop fighting. That is just such a huge waste of energy from my point of view. I mean, I did it for a while and I got fed up with it in the 1990s. I think, I just I can't keep doing that. What I want to do, and what I'm trying to do with this book is engage in positive construction of new theories and new ideas that will provide a way out of that kind of argument. I think it's an argument that can never be won by either side.
Mm-hmm.
So I tend to see those things and I kind of skim them, and I go, oh yeah, I can't take the time for this.
Mm-hmm. In Spain, it's very controversial, everything about transsexuality and so on, because we are trying to approve the trans law. So yeah. The current government is on the left, but there is a coalition between the Socialist Party and another party which is even more on the left. So there is a really disgusting dispute, the conflict, because the current government is not. He's doubting about if the trans law is good or not because of transgender issues, while the party on the extreme left is sure that the law is the good law and we have to move on and we have to approve it now. So
what does the law want to
well,
do?
the point is that if you identify as a woman, you can do it without a psychiatrist,
Uh-huh. Yep.
and
Psychiatry, yep.
you don't need any examination, medical examination, and so on. You only need to confirm that you feel like a woman or like a man, and that's it. You have to
Uh-huh.
wait maybe 2 months or something like that, but you don't have to demonstrate anything. You don't have to take hormones. You don't have to do anything at all. So in Spain, we are very aware about gender inequality and so on, and the government think that maybe that new law can be used as a way of how can I say it? Like some men can use the law in order to take advantages about because if you change the gender, if you are a man and you change and now you are a woman, people think that you can use some subsidies or privileges from women. I mean, I think that's completely weird for you, maybe, and this is quite confusing to me in order to explain it. But the thing is that there is a conflict between TERFs.
Yeah.
I don't know if that word is popular or common in English. Do
It
you
is
use
common in
TERFs?
English. Yeah. I don't care for it much because it's so ahistorical. It makes me crazy. It goes because I'm old enough that I remember
Uh-huh. Because
the origins of radical feminism, and the current use of the word is I hate it because it it's so ahistorical, but I understand how it's used, and that's, it's out
it,
there.
it's really common, and it's really common to use it now in Spain because feminists are always discussing, and you are a TERF or you are anti-TERF, and
Yeah.
I think we are in a kind of impasse, and I don't know how to figure it out or to
I
escape from this uh, sad
it yeah, it's
discussion.
because it gets back to, and I just designed a figure for this chapter I just finished. I can send it to you. It's not right yet. I wouldn't want you to publish it. Um, but it might be helpful uh because just to think about it, because really the two sides of that, and this is why I don't want to read Catherine Stock's work either. Um each side is coming from a fundamentally different and incompatible belief system about science, about how facts are established about sex and gender, um, and uh, and they will argue until, again, in English they'd say, until you're blue in the face, until you've run out of air, um, and and there will never be agreement. And it's because the fundamental belief systems out of which the arguments arise are incompatible.
So
I'll
what has to be done then?
Well, what happens in any legal system where there are incompatible beliefs? I mean, that's one side loses and one side wins, I guess. Um, there is a new book out, and you should take a look at it, by a legal scholar named Paisley Currah, Currah. I can, again, if I can send you, if you remind me,
Okay, great.
the
I
reference.
appreciate it.
And he's basically writing about sex in the law and showing how, and making an argument that sex gets defined differently in different legal settings. So it's defined one way for a birth certificate, it's defined a different way for Social Security, and a different way for um, where a person should be housed if they go to jail. And he
That
basically,
sounds very Foucaultian to me, no?
yes, it is, I think. It's very, and he basically argues that's okay. That actually we need to be thinking about these things contextually, and that may be an argument against passing a broad law, but rather an argument for addressing addressing each situation differently. And I think maybe that's what my little diagram, which just addresses the question, I narrowed it down to, do you think trans women should be allowed to go into public bathrooms that had been previously designated for cis women only. I've worded it a little bit differently, and basically that's what my little diagram tries to do, is how would you answer, what do you, depending on what you believe, how you come to your answer. It's kind of an infogram kind of thing, and see if it helps you or not. But I think Kura makes a very compelling argument about in the legal sphere, in the public legal sphere, about considering sex contextually.
So different solution for different situations, right?
Yeah. And certainly that's how it works now. I mean, he starts from
with example of the bathroom, because
I mean,
you are exemplifying with something really touching to me, because in Spain we are discussing about bathrooms.
Right, I know that, and it's getting discussed here too. I mean, and it's in different states are trying to pass different kinds of laws. And frankly, I think it's stupid, but it is. Bathrooms and sports, and particularly school sports, is the other place that the right wing has been able to emotionalize the question, and sort of use it to use the idea of passing laws to ban trans people from certain places, to excite their followers to become more engaged in voting for them and that kind of thing.
For instance, in Spain, we are aware about the swimmer Lia Thomas, because media is sending information about the controversy in relation to Lia Thomas.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. And my last question is about your book, because you told me you are writing a book, and I don't know how can we read your book? Maybe next year, 2 years. Do you have a title, or
first I have to finish it? So I hope to finish a rough draft by the summer, and then I'll send it to the publisher. I think we'll probably take it, and I know it will need a major rewrite. So I think realistically, what the summer of 23, fall of 23, or spring of 24 would be when we'd see it. You know, the Myths of Gender has been translated in, Sexing the Body has been translated into Spanish.
I read it.
So, and it's the same publisher, so hopefully they have a good line into getting it translated.
I remember it was Anagrama, I think, the publisher, the Spanish publisher, Anagrama.
Yeah,
it's a huge one. It's a huge one.
Yeah. So that's when I won't share it now. There'll come a point where I'd be willing to reporters or writers to share chapters, but it's too unfinished right now. I wouldn't want it quoted because I'm still figuring things out. Same with this diagram. I know it's not, I don't have it quite expressing what I want yet, but it might be helpful to you, just as for your eyes only, to see what I think about where the problem is and why, you know, you'll all keep yelling at each other until you just get tired and you won't solve it. So
excellent. That's it, Anne. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Sorry that I can't speak Spanish more than
no, come on. Sorry for my really bad English.
No, your English is totally understandable. It may be harder for you to understand me in that direction, but hopefully with the recording.
But you have a really clear English.
Oh, good.
No worries about that.
I'm trying.
Thank you very much. So
Okay,
I'm gonna send you the reference,
okay,
the
and I
link
will,
to,
I'll
and
send
you
you,
also, yeah,
I'll send you Kura's reference and
and the file.
yeah, and yes,
Well,
and the
the
file
link
of
to
this
the
diagram.
file recorded.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So
And
thank you very much.
I'll send you the recording, a link to the recording once. It takes, a few minutes to
Yeah, no worries.
download. But,
Perfect.
okay,
Perfect.
great.
Thank you very much.
All right, you're very welcome. Take care.
Bye bye.
Bye.